Okay, we are working on a study of Paul's epistle to the Philippians, and we covered all the way down into the beginning of verse 9 last week. And we're in a section that runs from verse 9 through 11. And we'll go ahead and read that section and then come back and make some comments on it. And this I pray, that your love may abound yet more and more in knowledge and in all judgment, that you may approve things that are excellent, that you may be sincere and without offense till the day of Christ, being filled with the fruits of righteousness which are by Jesus Christ unto the glory and praise of God. Now that little section is going to take us probably 2 weeks to get through, I would guess. There's a lot in it. In fact, we actually started on it last week. We worked through the first part of this last week. I want to remind you of something. As he prays that their love may abound, I defined abound for you last week. I want to do that again. Abound means to be present in overflowing measure. To be plentiful, to prevail widely, to abound in. And the analogy I usually use is one of taking a glass and pouring water into it until the water flows all over the table. Once it starts flowing all over the table, it's abounding. That glass is abounding with water. And what Paul is saying, he prays that your love may abound, yet more and more in knowledge and in all judgment. And that's where we're going to pick up this morning. He prays that their love will abound in knowledge and in judgment. The point being, as love becomes more plentiful, then knowledge and judgment become more plentiful. The more you love God and the brethren, the more knowledge, understanding, and judgment you have, okay? Now, why would your knowledge and judgment increase? Because your love of God and the brethren increases. Why would that, how do those two connect? Well, how do you show your love of God? And how do you show your love of the brethren? How do you do that? We're told over in 1 John chapter 5 and verse 2, by this we know that we love the children of God when we love God and keep his commandments. For this is the love of God, that we keep his commandments, and his commandments are not grievous. So being obedient to what you know the scripture says shows and evidences your love for God. The more obedient you are, the more love you're showing for God. And when you treat your brethren with the same respect that you treat God, and you're obedient to God's commandments regarding them, you're showing love to the brethren. And in doing so, you increase in knowledge and in judgment. Knowledge and judgment are predicated upon obedience to God's commandments. It's that simple. And I know this, I feel like I'm beating a dead horse here because I hit him so often, but that's really the truth. All of the fruits of the Spirit are tied to your obedience. The more obedient you are, the more fruit you get, whether that be knowledge, whether that be understanding, whether that be temporal blessings, whatever it is. The more obedient you are, the more blessings you receive. Jesus said over in Luke chapter 6 and verse 46, why do you call me Lord, Lord, and do not the things which I say? You see, this is, I guess it's okay for me to preach on this because this is an area that everybody seems to stumble on. And I think there's a reason for that. I really do. I think there's a reason that a lot of times people don't do exactly what they know God says they should do because they really don't trust him. There's a trust issue there. They really don't trust that he will do what he said he will do. They don't trust the promises. Now, that's a human failing, and what that really amounts to is they have a lack of faith. They don't believe what he says. He makes tons of promises in here that if you do this, I'll do this, and people will sit back and go, well, I don't really think he'll do it. Well, that's a trust issue. And folks, trust is the building block of love. You cannot love someone if you do not trust them. If you do not, one of the reasons that Wendy and I are still married is because we trust each other. If she goes to visit her family in California, I have no problems with that. I'm not afraid of anything she's doing. I want her to get home, but I'm not worried, and I don't think she worries about me when I travel out to Las Vegas. We trust each other, and hence we love each other. And you can't have love if you don't have trust. And it's the same way with God. If you don't trust God, you don't love him. And guess what? He can see your heart. He doesn't look at your outward, what you do outwardly. He looks inside. He knows what you think. He knows what you believe, and he knows whether you trust him or not. And based on the amount of trust that you have for him and the amount of love that you have for him, your blessings are tied directly to it. There's another problem that sometimes people make the mistake of. They come up with conditions. You know what, Lord, I'll serve you and I'll be obedient to you just as soon as you do this for me. There are people that'll do that. You get me this kind of a job, or you get me this kind of an income, or you put this much money in my savings account, or you do this so that I have security, so that I feel like I'm safe if I step out for you, and then I'll step out for you. There are people that do that. It's a foolish thing to do. Hebrews, I think, chapter 11, I think verse 6 says that without faith it's impossible to please him. You cannot please God by trying to work a deal where if he does something for you, you'll do something in return. Because I'll tell you something, he already did something for you. He saved your dirty, rotten, putrid soul from a devil's hell, and he did that for free. He gave you enough understanding and knowledge of the scriptures so that you know what a biblical church is, and he gave you that for free. And now you're going to stand back and say, well, I need more? I need more from you before I'm willing to be obedient to you? That's a silly place to be. And I'll tell you what will happen. If you dig your heels in, one or two things will happen. Number one, you'll never get what it was that you wanted. He'll make sure of it. And number two, eventually he'll start turning your lights off. And you'll lose every bit of understanding that you ever had. He wants you to walk by faith. He wants you to step out and trust him. And anything that you trust more than him, folks, is an idol. You start trusting the money in your bank account more than you trust God to get you through the tough times, and that money in your bank account has become an idol, and you are an idolater. That's a false god. God wants you to trust him and him alone. That's one of the reasons that we read over in 1 Corinthians chapter 1. Beginning at verse 26. For you see your calling, brethren, how that not many wise men after the flesh, not many. One of the queens, I forget which one, said, thank God for the M. Because at least it doesn't say they're not any. Not many wise men after the flesh, not many mighty, not many noble are called. But God hath chosen the foolish things of the world to confound the wise. And God hath chosen the weak things of the world to confound the things which are mighty, and base things of the world and things which are despised hath God chosen, yea, and things which are not, to bring to naught things that are. Why would you do that? Why would you pick this bunch of outcasts, Lord? It's like you went out and got a bunch of rednecks. Why would you pick that? Why would you do that? Verse 29, that no flesh should glory in his presence. You see, he wants you to trust in him and him alone. That's one of the interesting things about, you go back and look, again, a biblical church. You go back and look at the biblical church, and you notice that as soon as a person understood enough to know that Jesus Christ was the Son of God, it was time for them to get in water. And yet I can't tell you the number of people that I run into that they feel like they need to have a PhD and understand every little bit of doctrine before they're willing to take the step to be baptized. And I'm going to tell you something, you're never going to get it. You're never going to get it. God says as soon as you know enough, you need to get in the water, and you won't get any more until you are obedient to the command that he gave you. And it's that way with everything, folks. It's that way with judgment. It's that way with every blessing and tied in. Obedience is what brings about those blessings. And we're not talking about some sort of blind love here. We're talking about informed love. This word judgment is the action of trying a cause in a court of justice, trial, the faculty of judging, the ability to form an opinion, that function of the mind whereby it arrives a notion of anything, the critical faculty, discernment, that's what's available to you. Right judgment, if you're obedient to what you know God wants you to do. It's so simple. You know, Paul talks about, I think it was the Galatians or the Corinthians, one of the two, that he was afraid that they were going to be drawn away from the simplicity that's in Christ. This is so simple. God says, do this. Oh, okay, I'll do it. You swear fealty to him when you come up out of the water, just like you would in some medieval court when you answer to a king and the king tells you to do something, you do it. God tells you to do something, you do it. And you're rewarded as a result of it. And judgment, being able to discern between good and bad, is one of the blessings that you get as a result of being obedient. To discern means to separate things. One from another is distinct. The Greek word that's translated judgment is chasis. It means perception. In other words, discernment. It's related to the word that's translated senses over in Hebrews chapter 5 and verse 14. We're going to look at that in just a couple of minutes. Judgment is the function of conscience, which is the sense of right and wrong as regards things for which one is responsible. The faculty or principle which pronounces upon the moral quality of one's actions or motives, approving the right and condemning the wrong. And this is what you get. You get that type of judgment through obedience to God. It's one of the things he gives you. And folks, there's a distinction to be made in things. Now, I realize in this modern world, they don't seem to think there is, but you're required to make distinction between things. Look at Romans chapter 12 and verse 9. Let love be without dissimulation. Abhor that which is evil. Cleave to that which is good. There's a distinction to be made between what is evil and what is good. And you need judgment in order to be able to determine what is evil and what is good. And how do you get judgment? By being obedient to what you know God tells you to do. And the more obedient you are, the more judgment you have, and the easier it is for you to tell what's good and what's not good, to be able to avoid the bad, be able to do the good, and receive more blessings. It all goes hand in hand. Look at 3 John and verse 11. Beloved, follow not that which is evil, but that which is good. He that doeth good is of God, but he that doeth evil hath not seen God. You see, we're to discern good from evil. And it's a characteristic of evil times when this distinction isn't made. Turn over to Ezekiel chapter 22. We're going to begin at verse 25. Ezekiel 22:25. There is a conspiracy of her prophets in the midst thereof, like a roaring lion ravening the prey. They have devoured souls. They have taken the treasure and precious things. They have made of her many widows in the midst thereof. Her priests have violated my law and have profaned my holy things. They have put no difference between the holy and the profane. Neither have they showed difference between the unclean and the clean, and have hid their eyes from my Sabbaths, and I am profaned among them. Her princes in the midst thereof are like wolves ravening the prey, to shed blood and to destroy souls, to get dishonest gain, and her prophets have daubed themselves with untempered mortar, seeing vanity and divining lies unto them, saying, Thus saith the Lord God, when the Lord hath not spoken. You see, that's a characteristic of evil times, when people start calling good evil and evil good. Sounds a little bit like the modern day, doesn't it? Sounds just a little bit like the modern times that we live. Look at Isaiah chapter 5 and verse 20. Like Solomon said, there's no new thing under the sun. Just keep going around in circles. Isaiah 5:20, woe unto them that call evil good and good evil, that put darkness for light and light for darkness, that put bitter for sweet and sweet for bitter. Clearly we're living in evil times, because judgment and discernment of good and evil have flown right out the window. And it's popular in this day and age to love the evil and hate the good. Now I want you to look at Hebrews chapter 5. I mentioned this verse just a couple of minutes ago and told you we'd go over to it, so now we'll go to it. Hebrews chapter 5, and we're going to begin at verse 12. And remember, we were talking about the word judgment and how it's related to the word senses in this passage. Hebrews chapter 5, beginning at verse 12. For when for the time you ought to be teachers, you have need that one teach you again, which be the first principles of the oracles of God, and are become such as have need of milk and not of strong meat. These people had been in the church for a very, very long time, and they hadn't hardly learned anything at all. They were still babies. They weren't growing. They needed milk. They couldn't eat steak yet. They were still babies. Verse 13, for everyone that useth milk is unskillful in the word of righteousness, for he's a babe. Verse 14, but strong meat belongeth to them that are of full age, even those who by reason of use have their senses exercised. Remember, that word senses refers back to their judgment. Their judgment is exercised. That means it's been trained to discern both good and evil. You see, the more doctrine you receive, the better you are at judging the difference between good and evil. You've trained your judgment to be, to be able to discern good from bad. And that comes from use. That comes from doing what God tells you to do. You see, this church, for the time, they should be teachers. And I mentioned last week, it takes a little bit of knowledge to believe something. It takes a lot of knowledge to teach it. And it takes way, way, way even more to defend it. Well, these people, they should at least be able to teach, and yet they're still messing around eating pablum because they can't handle anything else. Why? Because they weren't obedient to what they already knew they should do. It's like anything, training a child. If you try to teach them to walk and they refuse to walk and they won't do it, well, how are you ever going to teach them to run if you can't get them to walk? You have to start somewhere and work your way up. You don't come out of the water a PhD in theology. You've got to grow just like you had to grow as a person. And the way you grow in spiritual things is by being obedient to every step along the way. And the minute you say, okay, that's it, I'm not going that far, well, you just cut yourself off. And unfortunately, that's what happened to these people that Paul was writing to here. They hadn't done it. They hadn't done what they knew they should do. And so they were still, even though they'd been around for years, they were still babies. We've had people in this church that were like that, been members of the church for 20, 30 years and still didn't know anything other than just the very basics. They used to sit right where you're sitting right now. It happens. Now, I understand, and I was told this at my ordination, not everybody in the church is going to be a ram. Not everyone is, you're just not going to get all rams. That's just not how it's going to work. But folks ought to at least be more than lambs. They ought to grow some. And the key to the whole thing is God shows you something, do it. And then he'll show you something else. Then do it. And then he'll show you something else. But if you're waiting for him to show you all of this stuff before you're willing to do anything, you never did the first thing. So you never see the second or the third or the fourth or the fifth or however many of them there are downstream for you. Turn over to Proverbs chapter 1. Proverbs was written, for the most part, not all of it, but most of it was written by Solomon. And Solomon was the wisest man on planet Earth aside from the Lord Jesus Christ. And he's the one that wrote Proverbs. And he wrote them for a reason. There's a reason that we have the book of Proverbs in the Bible. Where'd my note go? Proverbs chapter 1, verses 1 through 4. The Proverbs of Solomon, the son of David, king of Israel, to know wisdom and instruction, to perceive the words of understanding, to receive the instruction of wisdom, justice, and judgment and equity, to give subtlety to the simple, to the young man knowledge and discretion. That's the purpose of the book of Proverbs. It will give you these things if you study it. This is one of the reasons that for years I've taught people, first thing in the morning when you get up, read the chapter of Proverbs that coincides with that day of the month. Today is what, the 13th. So this morning you'd get up and you'd read the 13th chapter of Proverbs. Take you 4 minutes. Say a prayer and go about your business. You do that every day. You will read through the book of Proverbs 12 times every year. After 10 years, you will have read the book of Proverbs 120 times. And you will be able to perceive wisdom and justice because you'll learn while you're reading. Whether you realize it or not, by osmosis, you'll learn things. And that's what this is for. So it's here to know wisdom. Wisdom is defined as the capacity of judging rightly in matters relating to life and conduct, soundness of judgment in the choice of means and ends. Any of you want that? You can get it from Proverbs. That's one of the reasons for it. Instruction. The action of instructing, furnishing with knowledge or information, training in knowledge or learning, or teaching, the imparting of knowledge, skill, or education. That's what Proverbs was written for, to give you that, to give you instruction. Understanding, the power or ability to understand, to comprehend, to apprehend the meaning of or import of, to grasp the ideal of. Justice, the quality of being just, that does what is morally right, righteous, just, or simply just righteous in the sight of God, to do the right thing. These are all things that Proverbs is written to instruct you in, to learn how to do. Justice. Oh, I just read that one. Judgment. We already looked at judgment. Equity, the quality of being equal or fair. Fairness, impartiality, even-handed in dealings. Subtlety, which is acuteness, clearness of understanding or insight. Knowledge is acquaintance, familiarity gained by experience and information. Discretion is the action of separating or distinguishing, the action of discerning or judging, judgment, decision, discrimination. And you see, that's the main reason that I tell folks, read the book of Proverbs. If you don't do anything else, if that's all you do all day long, get up in the morning and read the chapter of Proverbs. I've told you this before as well. I try to walk in the mornings. Now, I didn't this morning. We had a rough night last night because of a storm, and Gibson was not a happy camper, so I was on the couch until 3. So I didn't feel like walking this morning, plus it's a little bit hot. But I usually try to walk in the morning. And I find that when I walk in the morning, I'm up and moving all day long. I only have to walk a couple of miles, and I'm motivated to get up and do stuff the rest of the day. If I don't, I just lay around like a snail. It's how it works. Well, you know what? It works that way in the spiritual realm as well. You read the book of Proverbs in the morning, and the rest of the day, you're thinking about God's stuff. So you end up reading more. You end up studying more. You end up learning more. You know, there's something else that this proves, this prayer here in Proverbs, and that is that tolerance of everything is not love. Accepting everything that goes on is not love. That's a mistake. Love can and does abound in judgment. It's not unloving to judge someone. If someone starts to get, and this is part of my job sometimes, somebody starts to get off the line, I got to yank them back. And that's judgment. That's part of what I have to do. That doesn't mean I don't love them. You know, when I used to discipline my children, it didn't mean that I didn't love them. It meant that I did love them. If I didn't love them, I'd just let them wander off and do whatever they wanted to do. See, the world's got this thing completely twisted around backwards. They think, well, if you discipline the child, you're being mean to them, you're being evil. No, you're trying to train them so that they don't step in the same hole again. Because if you don't train them, that's exactly where they're going to go. And you know, the Bible teaches that there is some love that is to be avoided. Let's look at a few. John chapter 3 and verse 19. Let's look at verse 18 to get the context. He that believeth on him is not condemned, but he that believeth not is condemned already, referring to Jesus, because he hath not believed in the name of the only begotten Son of God. And this is the condemnation, that light has come into the world, and men love darkness rather than light, because their deeds were evil. You see, we're not to love darkness. That's something we shouldn't love. 1 John chapter 2 and verse 15 says, love not the world, neither the things that are in the world. If any man love the world, the love of the Father is not in him. Love of this world is to be avoided. Now, we have to live in this world, and we have to exist in this world, but that doesn't mean we have to love it. Revelation chapter 22, verses 14 and 15 says, blessed are they that do his commandments, that they may have right to the tree of life and may enter in through the gates into the city. For without are dogs and sorcerers and whoremongers and murderers and idolaters and whosoever loveth and maketh a lie. We're to love truth. We're not to love lies. And we're told over in 1 Corinthians 13 and verse 6 that true love rejoiceth not in iniquity. Iniquity is injustice and unrighteousness. It rejoiceth not in iniquity, but it rejoiceth in the truth. And a lack of judgment is destructive. Look at Proverbs chapter 13. Verse 23. Much food is in the tillage of the poor, but there is that is destroyed for want of judgment. You might accumulate a lot and lose it all because of a lack of judgment. Proverbs chapter 6. Beginning at verse 6. Go to the ant, thou sluggard, consider her ways and be wise, which having no guide, overseer, or ruler, provideth her meat in the summer and gathereth her food in the harvest. How long wilt thou sleep, O sluggard? When wilt thou arise out of thy sleep? Yet a little sleep, a little slumber, a little folding of the hands to sleep, so shall thy poverty come as one that travaileth, and thy want as an armed man. Look at an ant. Look how they provide for themselves. Look at how just animals sometimes, many times, have more sense than humans do. They prepare for winter. We have a freezer, and it has to sit outside because we don't have a place to put it inside, so it's in the carport. And when we first moved over there, I didn't think too much about it until I was cleaning it out one day, and I found underneath in the back where the motor is, it was absolutely jam-packed full of these little round seed-looking things that came off of a queen palm. There's a queen palm that stands not too far from it, that squirrels had taken all of these things and stuffed them in there to keep them so that when times got hard, they had a savings account built up. Squirrels are smarter than some folks I know. They save stuff up. They put away for. Look to them. Proverbs chapter 15 and verse 27 says, he that is greedy of gain troubleth his own house, but he that hateth the gifts shall live. You see, there's a difference between God rewarding someone and someone being greedy. Greedy folks usually turn out to be thieves. If money is all you're interested in and you're greedy about money, you'll probably lose it all. It's just how it always works, especially if you're a Christian. If you decide to be greedy and hang on to everything you've got because of fear that if I let any of this go, I'm going to starve to death, well, now you're trusting the money that you're holding on to more than you're trusting God. And I already covered that one with you earlier. That's called idolatry. That's why there's a problem with being greedy. It talks about, over in Timothy, where it talks about the love of money is the fruit of all evil. It's not the money, it's the love of money. And so that's what this verse is referring to here. Look at, where am I? Proverbs 16 and verse 32. He that is slow to anger. Now see, here's someone with self-control, someone that can control their passions. He that is slow to anger is better than the mighty, and he that ruleth his spirit than he that taketh a city. You see, these are things that Proverbs is designed to teach you about self-control, about judgment, about temperance. Proverbs chapter 17, verses 27 and 28. He that hath knowledge spareth his words, and a man of understanding is of excellent spirit. Even a fool, when he holdeth his peace, is counted wise. You ever notice that? Sometimes you can have somebody that's an absolute fool, but they don't ever say anything. Probably good that they don't. Better not to open your mouth and remove all doubt, right? Even a fool, when he holdeth his peace, is counted wise, and he that shutteth his lips is esteemed a man of understanding. Again, self-control. Look at Proverbs 21 and verse 17. He that loveth pleasure shall be a poor man. He that loveth wine and oil shall not be rich. Verse 20. There is treasure to be desired and oil in the dwelling of the wise, but a foolish man spendeth it up. You see, that's one of the things Proverbs helps. It helps to teach self-control. Now, with love abounding, we're back to Philippians. We're good. Back to our verse in Philippians. Verse 9. This I pray that your love may abound yet more and more in knowledge and in all judgment, that ye may approve things that are excellent. You see, you need the knowledge and the judgment in order to approve the things that are excellent. And with love abounding in knowledge and in all judgment, they'd be able to approve the things that are more excellent. The word approve means to put to the proof or the test, to experience it, to try it, test it. Over in 1 Thessalonians 5:21, where it says, prove all things, that means test it. Actually, test it. There are multitudes of occasions in the Bible where God says, test me, try me, see if I'm not telling you the truth. And that's how you approve things. You test them. You find out if they're right or not. The Greek word that's translated approved is also rendered proving over in Ephesians chapter 5. Flip over there real quick. Ephesians chapter 5, verses 8 through 10. For ye were sometimes darkness, but now ye are light in the Lord. Walk as children of light. For the fruit of the Spirit is in all goodness and righteousness and truth, proving, there's that word, proving what is acceptable unto the Lord. Testing it, trying it. And in Romans chapter 12, verses 1 and 2. I beseech you, therefore, brethren, by the mercies of God, that you present your bodies a living sacrifice, holy, acceptable unto God, which is your reasonable service. And be not conformed to this world, but be ye transformed by the renewing of your mind, that ye may prove what is that good and acceptable and perfect will of God. You see, this is a testing of the things that are excellent. Excellent is of a person or thing that excels or surpasses in any respect. We're to be able to approve things that are excellent. Wisdom, which is given in the Word of God, that is excellent, and it speaks of excellent things. Look at Proverbs chapter 8. Verses 6 and 7. Hear, for I will speak of excellent things, and the opening of my lips shall be right things, for my mouth shall speak truth, and wickedness is an abomination to my lips. And in Proverbs 22, and verse 20, have not I written to thee excellent things in counsel and knowledge? So you see, being instructed out of the law, out of the scripture, one knows God's will, and God can approve the things that are more he knows his will, and he proves the things that are more excellent. And that's judgment. Remember? Being able to discern, being able to know. Romans chapter 2 and verse 18. Where Paul's referring to the Jews here, and he says, and knowest his will, and approvest the things that are more excellent, being instructed out of the law. So the Christian life is an experience of the will of God, and it's a test of what we do with what we've been taught out of the will of God, or of the will of God, out of the Word of God. Everything that we learn, we test it, and we find out that it's a more excellent thing because it comes true. God says this, we test it, it comes true. And it helps us walk through the next. Eventually, after time, you build up more and more and more faith because you've tried this. I tried it 10 years ago and it worked, it still works. Every time I try God, the answer's the same. He's always there. I'll keep walking. And the longer you're around, the more you grow in this, and the more you grow in trust, and the more you grow in love. And the more you grow in love and in trust, the more you abound in knowledge and justice and judgment and all the rest. They're all tied into that, but you've got to... Years ago, there was a movie called, I forget the name of it now. I haven't used this as an analogy in a long, long time. I think it was the Book of Eli. I don't know if any of you have ever saw the Book of Eli. I forget the actor. Denzel Washington. He was blind. You didn't know that until the end of the movie, but and he had a book that he was. The Book of Eli, the book was the Bible. It was in Braille. Again, you didn't know that till the end of the movie. So if you haven't seen it, I just ruined it for you. But you could have done a Google search and found it out anyway. But he would walk. He was on a mission to deliver this book. It was kind of an apocalyptic sort of a movie, and he was trying to deliver this book to somebody where they could then have it in a library, and he would walk along and he'd run into trouble, so he'd have to stop and deal with the trouble that he had to deal with. Then he would get back up and just start walking again until he ran into more trouble. Then he'd deal with the trouble he had to deal with, and he'd get back up and start walking again. Well, that's the Christian life, folks. Think of the book of Eli. You walk in the direction and something happens, you got to deal with it. So you deal with that, and then you get back up and start walking again. If you fall down, then you get up and you apologize to God for falling down, you dust yourself off, and you start walking again. And eventually, you make it to the library. That's how it works. And it's like that for all of us. And the only way you can lose is if you quit. You just keep putting one foot in front of the other and trust that God will be there, because he always is. Now, you may not realize it. You may not, it's that poem, the one where there's the one set of footprints, where at the end you find out that it was him that was carrying you through all of that. You may not realize he might be carrying you right now. During those times of trouble, he's usually the one doing the work, and he's carrying you, just don't realize it. But you just keep walking. So that's the Christian life. And taking the knowledge and the judgment that we gain from the Word of God and applying it in the choices and the challenges of life, then we test by experience the will of God. The things of God's Word, it's not theory. This isn't just theory. They can be proven by actual experience. And a life lived according to the will of God is superior to any other kind of life you can find. Look at Proverbs chapter 12. In verse 26, the righteous is more excellent than his neighbor, but the way of the wicked seduceth them. One of the things we have to remember, and that is that the world is not our friend, folks. The world's not our friend. The world is doing everything it can to knock you off of that path. Every time you take a step, there's a guy out there that's got red horns and a red tail and a pitchfork, and he knows you pretty well. And he knows how he can sucker you in to doing what you ought not do. And he whispers in your ear, and he sends things your way to knock you off the path, because that's what he wants to do. And if you let him do it, well, it's your fault for letting him do it. You know he's out there. The world's not your friend. We have to live here, but we don't have to love it, and we don't have to live in it. We just have to live through it. So Paul's praying that their love will abound in doing the will of God as revealed in his word. And he prays that they may be sincere and with offense until the day of Christ. And this results from love abounding in knowledge and in all judgment, so that excellent things are being approved. The word sincere means not falsified or perverted in any way, characterized by the absence of all dissimulation or concealment or pretense, something that's honest and straightforward. Being sincere is the opposite of hypocrisy. Hypocrisy is the assuming of a false appearance of virtue or goodness with dissimulation. In other words, being fake. Being a fake, being what you aren't, acting like something that you aren't, pretending to be something that you aren't. That's hypocrisy. Look at Matthew chapter 22. Verses 15 through 18. Then went the Pharisees and took counsel how they might entangle him in his talk. And they sent out unto him their disciples with the Herodians, saying, Master, we know that thou art true and a teacher of the way of God in truth, neither carest thou for any man, for thou regardest not the person of men. Just kissing up to him, right? You ever run into anybody like that? I have. Just kiss your rear end all the way along, when in reality what they're trying to do is put a noose around your neck and drag you down the street. Tell us therefore, what thinkest thou? Is it lawful to give tribute unto Caesar or not? But Jesus perceived their wickedness and said, Why tempt ye me, ye hypocrites? You see, pretending to be something you're not, that's being a hypocrite. Look at Matthew 23 and verse 14. Woe unto you, scribes and Pharisees, hypocrites! For you devour widows' houses, and for a pretense make long prayer, therefore you shall receive the greater damnation. You see, they're just pretending to be holy men when they're not, taking advantage of widows. That word devour, there's one you can't really take that one in a primary meaning because they're not having their house for lunch. It's, but they're destroying it. Look at verses 25 through 28. Woe unto you, scribes and Pharisees, hypocrites! For you make clean the outside of the cup and of the platter, but within they're full of extortion and excess. Thou blind Pharisee, cleanse first that which is within the cup and platter, that the outside of them may be clean also. Woe unto you, scribes and Pharisees, hypocrites! For you're like unto whited sepulchres, which indeed appear beautiful outward, but are within full of dead men's bones and all uncleanness. Even so ye also outwardly appear righteous unto men, but within you're full of hypocrisy and iniquity. That was the biggest problem with the Pharisees. They wanted everybody to think that they were so holy, when in reality they were the worst. And being sincere, as Paul is saying here, that you may approve the things that are excellent, that you may be sincere and without offense. Sincere is the opposite of hypocrisy. There are some fearful judgments that await hypocrites. Turn back to Job, verse 8 and 13. Job 8:13. So are the paths of all that forget God, and the hypocrite's hope shall perish. There's not a lot good said about hypocrites. Job chapter 13 and verse 16. He also shall be my salvation, for an hypocrite shall not come before him. It talks over in the Gospels about those that do things to be seen of men. The Pharisees were real big about making long prayers on the street corners and wearing their holy garb, and everything they did was so that they could be seen of men as someone holy. They didn't do anything in order to be seen of God as holy, just of men. They wanted the men to worship them. Not a lot of good about that. And serving God sincerely will result in putting out of your life whatever offends him. And this goes back to what I started with this morning. The longer you're a Christian, the more you realize that there are things that offend God. You may not have known it when you first came out of the water, but after a few years, you start to realize, wait a minute, what I'm doing here, I always thought it was okay, it's not. The more you learn, the more you have to come into line with what God's teaching says. It's a process. And serving him sincerely will result in that. Look at Joshua chapter 24. Joshua 24, verses 14 and 15. Now therefore fear the Lord, and serve him in sincerity and in truth, and put away the gods which your fathers served on the other side of the flood and in Egypt, and serve ye the Lord. And if it seem evil unto you to serve the Lord, choose you this day whom you will serve, whether the gods which your fathers served that were on the other side of the flood, or the gods of the Amorites in whose land you dwell. But as for me and my house, we will serve the Lord. You see, serving in sincerity. Look at 1 Corinthians chapter 6 and verse 3. Know ye not that we shall judge angels? How much more the things that pertain to this life? Now, how are you going to do that if you don't have judgment? How are we going to judge the things of this life if you don't have judgment? And how do you get judgment? Through obedience. Through love of God. That's how you get judgment. Someday, we're going to judge angels. God's children are going to judge this world. This is a good time to practice it, to at least start getting some judgment. And the way you do it is by doing what you know God wants you to do. And it says sincerely without offense. One of the things that being without offense does is it helps you not to lead others into or lead yourself into sin. Romans chapter 14 and verse 21. Dealing with the idea of some of our liberties, Paul says here, it is good neither to eat flesh, nor to drink wine, nor anything whereby thy brother stumbleth or is offended or made weak. You see, one of the things that we're able to do by increasing in judgment is know those different areas of liberty where you could offend someone. You could cause someone to lose their entire relationship with God by saying the wrong thing, by doing the wrong thing in front of them. It's a heavy weight to carry around. So you need judgment. You need to be able to discern. You need to understand how to go about dealing with folks sometimes. 2 Corinthians chapter 6 and verse 3. Paul says, giving no offense in anything, that the ministry be not blamed. And one of the things that Paul always exercised, he exercised himself to always have a conscience void of offense toward God and toward men, over in Acts 24, verses 15 and 16. And that's something that we should strive to do. That whatever we do, we don't offend God and we don't offend men. We speak truth. Now, if the truth offends them, I'm sorry. There's not much you can do about that. Well, we've gone quite a while. This is a pretty good place, I think, to jump off for this morning, and they'll pick this back up again next week. Just remember that love abounds in the exercise of a good conscience. In other words, we do what's right because we love God and we want to please Him, rather than for self-serving reasons. Matthew chapter 23 and verse 5. And here's what I was just referring to. Let's look at this. Let's start at verse 1 and read down to this, just so that you can see the difference. Then spake Jesus to the multitude and to his disciples, saying, the scribes and the Pharisees sit in Moses' seat. All therefore whatsoever they bid you observe, that observe and do. But do ye not after their works, for they say and do not. You see, they were, at that time, they were still God's church. So what they taught from the Bible, do that. But don't do the stuff that's not in the Bible. Avoid that stuff. Avoid their traditions and all the rest of that nonsense. But what they tell you, book, chapter, and verse, you do that. For they bind heavy burdens and grievous to be borne, and they lay them on men's shoulders, but they themselves will not move them with one of their fingers. But all their works they do for to be seen of men. They make broad their phylacteries, enlarge the borders of their garments, and love the uppermost rooms at the feasts and the chief seats in the synagogues, and greetings in the markets, and to be called of men, Rabbi, Rabbi. But be not called Rabbi, for one is your master, even Christ, and all you are brethren. You see, that's the picture of what you don't want to do. Don't do that. Serve God sincerely. Look at 1 Corinthians chapter 13 and verse 5. Talking about charity. In verse 4 it says, charity suffereth long and is kind. Charity envieth not. Charity vaunteth not itself, is not puffed up, doth not behave itself unseemly, seeketh not her own, is not easily provoked, thinketh no evil. Being sincere and serving Christ in sincerity is not seeking your own, it's seeking His. It's doing what you know He wants you to do. And when He shows you that He wants you to do something, then you can kick and scream all you want to, but you know what? Eventually you're going to end up doing it. So just do it. Get it over with. It's so much easier that, my dad was like that. He'd tell me to do something, I'd tell him, no. And then I'd find out that maybe I should have just said yes, because it wouldn't hurt as much and I could sit down for dinner instead of standing up for the next couple hours. Sometimes God does that with His children as well. You tell Him no, and okay, well, we'll let you suffer for a while. We'll let you just twist in the wind for a while. And then when you come back and ask again, the answer is going to be the same. And eventually, maybe you'll wise up and do it. And then when you do it and you find out, well, I should have done it to start with. Would have made life a lot easier. With that, I thank you this morning for your very kind and patient attention. Let's stand and be dismissed in prayer.